Episode 2, Benzos Hacked My Brain. Cannabis Saved Me.
Plants for Lyfe Podcast is straight conversation about plant-based whole foods, also known as ITAL lifestyles for health and wellness with a special focus on cannabis. Felecia Dawson MD, cannabis advocate, educator, dual board certified physician, obstetrics, gynecology, and integrative medicine. Oskii Chevanier, fourth generation Jamaican herbalist, plant-based nutritionist, indoor cannabis cultivator, and veteran cannabis pioneer. And Marilyn Pierce RN, author, speaker, and cannabis advocate. Join us as we discuss nutritional plant-based lifestyles, including cannabis.
Oskii, how you doing, brother?
How you doing, Doc?
I'm doing great. The last time I saw you, you mentioned that you got yourself off of benzos or benzodiazepines, and I was like, what? And I want to hear more about your story. But before you get to your story, I would like to set the table a little bit for our listeners to let them know what benzodiazepines are.
Please do. I wish I knew.
They are medicines, pharmaceuticals that are prescribed to help with anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia, alcohol withdrawal, muscle spasms, and Xanax, Valium, Halcyon are some of the more common ones. And in fact, Xanax is the number one benzodiazepine prescribed in this country. They can be lifesavers in the short term, but in the long term, they can be addictive. People can develop tolerance to them. That means it takes a lot more medicine to get the same effect. And they have a lot of adverse reactions, including drug-to-drug interactions and drug-to-herb interactions. But I want to hear about how did you or why did you come to even begin to use them?
Well, it's a story of, it's really the last of a slew of medications that were prescribed to me that I actually chose to use. I actually ended up using. I was diagnosed with Tourette syndrome, ADHD, ADD, when I was really young. I got diagnosed with those things along with getting diagnosed with IQ of 136, which kind of made me, I guess, an idiot savant.
That's amazing.
Anyhow, they prescribed me medications from then. My mother had me late, around 39 years old, 40 years old. She almost died having me. She came here immigrated from Jamaica and just went in and didn't really slow down. She came here and was eating all the stuff America had to offer, the McDonald's, the fast food, and her blood pressure was high. She was depressed. All type of stuff was happening to her when she got pregnant with me, and she was on Valium, and she almost died having me. Like, her almost dying having me is what struck her into getting back to what she knew from home. And is what really brought her back and saying all the stuff that she remembered from home and got herself back into her herbal medicines that she knew from Jamaica. And that's why I got raised with all this information, because she actually saved her own life.
Now,
My dad didn't.
Now, as an obstetrician, I'm curious to see what exactly was the factor that made her almost die. Was it an obstetric issue or what?
It was just she was unhealthy, and she was having a child at 39 years old. And she was on pharmaceuticals. She was not healthy. She was not living healthy, not eating healthy. She was not doing anything that concerned her health. She was basically a victim of what most people are victims of today. And if she had kept on that route, she would have been probably passed by now, or in some sort of slew of pharmaceuticals and incapacity. My father didn't straighten up didn't get back into the holistic lifestyle like that, because he was provider, and he didn't concern himself with his health like that. And he didn't get a scare of almost dying from having a child either. So his first scare came when he caught cancer, and then he just died from that, Back to the point, I got prescribed bunches of medications and pharmaceuticals back when I was a child. My mother was like, she had already been through the medications at that point and didn't want them. And she was like, I'm not going to do this to my kid. At that point is when she started pretty much pulling things from my diet. She did her research and saw things that aggravate Tourette's and that aggravate ADHD, artificial colorings and artificial sugars and all that stuff, and started pulling all that stuff from my diet. and started giving me more whole foods, plant-based stuff that she knows that she was raised on, treating my conditions and my tics and whatnot with different herbs and, rescue remedy and these type of different holistic things and she started getting into holistic practitioners, everything as well. Like she knew about Sebi and all that way back then. So she actually was treating me with holistic means for my whole childhood until I got to middle school. Right around the time my father caught cancer, I was around 11 years old, he caught cancer, is when my issues started because, the turmoil of that in the house, I started, and then also me going through puberty, I started, acting out. So that's when they actually started trying to implement the medications. First ones I took, Haldol and clonidine. Had me inside my 7th grade classroom drooling on the desk.
That is shocking.
Yeah. I didn't want to do that. Mind you, I'm in gifted classes and all that, so I have like tons of work and stuff to do, and like these drugs had me in the classroom looking like a zombie. Like,
that sounds almost like a sledgehammer to kill a fly. I mean, it's like ADHD, Tourette syndrome, but they're going to give you Haldol, an antipsychiatric. That's a psychotic medicine.
Here's the thing. I got diagnosed after that when my father started dying, and with the turmoil of life, they then diagnosed me with bipolar disorder because I was having these issues with my anger and all that stuff because I was freaking out by my dad dying. And I was running from the house, and at that, when you go into a place and they try to diagnose you with something, they're going to give you something. So bipolar was the diagnosis. And from there, they had bipolar on there, they had ADHD, and they had Tourette syndrome, child Tourette's. So I got prescribed and running wild, and when my dad finally died, I hit the streets running. So my mother couldn't do anything but like try to relay on, depending on the doctors, and the doctors were just giving her all kinds of stuff to give me. When I was in high school, and I wasn't taking none of them. I could name off on top of the head right now probably 6, 7, 8 medications that I prescribed to take that I did not ever take. Wellbutrin, Zyprexa, Zoloft, Paxil, Cerazone, Depakote. I could go on. Xanax was just like the last one. All these medications were prescribed to me, and I didn't take none of them. A couple of them, I took a couple like a day or two here or there, and they were like, I was like, what on earth is this feeling? Like, I can't, are you kidding me? But anyhow, this entire time, mind you, I also started smoking weed when I was 11 years old. So I've been smoking herb from 11 years old and treating myself and getting in trouble for this stuff. About 6 or 7 different medications that I'm pretty sure of have come upon on lawsuits that I've seen, late night infomercials. I've seen about 6 or 7 of them that I've been prescribed come up on those lawsuits that I did not take, and I all these medications, all this time, I pretty much bucked it using cannabis. I was my whole entire life using cannabis, treating my condition and not realizing, getting in trouble for it, just being thought of as a black sheep and a wild child who just smokes weed all the time. But all this time I was not taking this host of supersonic medications they're prescribing me. Mind you, I was also a teenage hustler who was making his own money and providing for himself at this time as well. Like I wasn't like running around incapacitated, So the medications would have done that to me.
And you are the classic example of someone self-medicating. That's to feel more normal.
Right.
You are the classic example of that.
Right. That's what I pretty much realized now that I'm older. I didn't understand that then. Anyhow, here is how I came to be taking benzos, because at around 19 was probably the second time after my father died. My world caved in a few times. I had, there's ups and downs. So the second I can put a finger on time my world caved in is when my big homie went to the feds. They took my big homie to the feds, and that right there just pretty much stopped the flow of income that we used to have. We didn't need anybody, so we kind of didn't have anything outside of our circle. And when our circle got messed up, it was just like to the streets. And I got into selling drugs to survive that I didn't really sell before because my connects weren't there anymore. So I had to go into the hood and start selling coke and crack and all type of foolishness. And I was losing my my grip. Like I wasn't sleeping for days, and I was just like up, and it was not good. I was mentally unstrong, and I needed help. So I started calling my family like, yo, I need help. My sister was like, listen, your brain is, and you know the 20s is when your mind, I was doing research as well too, and they say 20s when your mind can snap into schizophrenia and stuff like that. And I was like, oh my God, yo, I hope I ain't losing my damn mind. So my sister was like, listen, your mind is breaking. If your leg was broken, you wouldn't sit there with a broken leg and walk around. You get a splint on it, right? And I was like, yeah.
That's a good analogy.
That's what she gave me. So that's what made me go to the doctor. And I went to the doctor and they gave me these benzos. And they were like, yep, take these. And I was like, all right, that put a crutch in the situation. And mind you, this time, it's like I got to the point where smoking cannabis wasn't even helping. It was not good enough. Like I didn't understand ingesting cannabis yet. I was not eating it yet. I hadn't even gotten there. I just didn't know. I didn't know you could, eating it would get me gone for too long. I didn't even know how to gauge it. It wasn't in my mind. We ate cannabis here and there, but it wasn't part of our thing. We smoked weed all day.
And a lot of people don't know that when you smoke it, you burn off a lot of the cannabinoids and terpenes, so you don't even get 50% of the medicine that's there for you. Right,
and it also is, where it may be fast acting, it doesn't have the long lasting effects. Like it can help you out of an acute situation, but in the long-term anxiety, like I was having real anxiety attacks, man. Like the type of anxiety attacks that happen when you're up all night and people are trying to rob and kill you. Okay? It's not a game. You can't, like the anxiety attacks come and you feel like you're about to have a heart attack. I thought I was dying a couple times. I called a hospital. Matter of fact, it was to the point where smoking weed would induce these anxiety attacks.
Did you know where your weed was coming from?
Yes, we just started growing it at that point.
Okay.
We were
Were you growing it like organically at that point?
No.
Okay.
Absolutely not. We know anything about that.
Yeah, it might have had something to do with what I was putting on it.
Man, what are you? Of course, it up, what are you talking about, man? We had stuff that was so full of stuff that it'd make your eye twitch. Like we've had plenty of dudes in that era calling paramedics on themselves. The paramedics come through, man, you just smoke too much weed, man. But definitely because of us doing, put it this way, there were strategies in the guerrilla growers days to make your yield high. No one knew what you were putting inside of your herb, we're getting out of it. It was completely just make your yield high. So we juiced them up as much as possible, and we had them on hydroponic systems. It wasn't about growing out of soil. It was hydroponic systems with a ton of fertilizer. Anyhow, back to the point. The doctor put me on these benzodiazepines, and I started taking them as my prescription said. I took them about 2 years. I took them 2 or 3 years because around 24, I came up out of that hole I was in, and I started getting back on top. Like that's pretty much when we started profiting from growing the weed. Now we understood how to grow it properly, and the dudes who were getting it right in the late 90s had got it right and was handing it down to me, the strategy of how to guerrilla grow. And so that time, I had grow house at that point, or I was dabbling into getting grow houses. I was back to myself. Herb. There were no other drugs around. There was no crack and coke selling going on. There was just herb. All right. So at that point, there was no more Xanax, and I was just growing my herb.
So I'm sorry. So there was no more Xanax. So how did you get to the no more Xanax part? Because one of the big things about benzodiazepines is that you just can't stop them 24,
I didn't
by
have a
cold
problem
turkey
back
in general. You were
my usage was so small back then.
Okay.
I was on alprazolam, like the 0.25s.
So a small dose.
Yeah, and I never really went above that. I kind of just used it. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't really like I was kind of just crutching on it, but I still had all my other meds. It wasn't like I didn't have herb. So when I got my herb back properly and I was growing weed, it was like I had huge spliffs all day long. It was no need for it. And the pressure on my chest wasn't as high either. I wasn't running around like, having to fight for my life. I was growing plants. So after that time, I was good. Till about 2006, when Babylon kicked in the door and raided my grow and took us down. So therefore, I had to start fighting charges, and I got out on pretrial. And mind you, these were very serious charges. This was armed trafficking, and they charged me with 10 tons, and my first plea was 30 years. It was a punishable by life offense. It was a big thing. When I finally got my $20,000 bond, after I had no bond at first, when I got my $20,000 bond and got out and tried to smoke weed and got my drug test, they were like, look, this comes up in your piss again, you're gonna be fighting this shit from inside. And I was like, oh my God, I can't. So instead of going to the doctors for the alprazolam, I went to the streets and got Xanax, because I was in Miami, and Miami is at that time, the capital of pill mills. South Florida, Miami, West Palm Beach, and Broward County were the top. Those three places was the top for pill milling. I was so lucky that I was caught with the Xanax one before the opiates came in. The opiates are coming in right when I was going into prison, and the opiates are coming in, and it was like going crazy.
Mm-hmm. So
I was like this close.
When you say you got caught with Xanax, what do you mean by that? You violated parole?
No. I mean, when I got caught on it, like I got caught in the Xanax wave. Like there was a ton of pills being pushed into the streets from these pharmaceuticals. In Miami, you have a bunch of doctors who come straight from Cuba, and they have pharmacies, and they don't go by this country's rules. They just, you feel me? You know people, you get what you need, period. So they're and as you know, doctors, if there's doctors don't make much money when there's a thick environment of them. So if they can, the opportunity arises in a city like Miami, they'll push these pills. And they were doing that hugely in Miami. It was if you look it up, you'll see how bad it was. Like they were literally trapping. There were doctors' offices with lines down the street, looking just like the dope spot.
And what years was this again? What years was this?
This was in between about 2006, 2010. It's all going on. Between 2006 and 2009, I was fighting these charges, taking these Xanax. These benzodiazepines, I was taking the Xanax bars. I started out taking maybe about a half and a quarter. By the time I was done fighting my charges and ready to take my time, I was taking maybe 8 of those bars a day.
Wow.
Literally, like eating 2 at a time, chewing them up. There were times where I would wake up on the floor, passed out in my apartment, not knowing like what the hell is going on, like looking at the front of my, where am I? There was times when I would be, many times, fighting to breathe in my sleep, like feeling my breath, like I can't breathe for nothing, gasping, and like at the last minute, wake up like, oh my God. So I was only taking these like that because I couldn't do anything. I was smoking cigarettes like a madman too. I would buy like, God, I wasn't really a cigarette smoker. I had quit back when I was 17 or something. So I would have like 5 different brands. And I would take different ones to like kind of act like I had different varieties of weed. So I didn't have a brand. I was just smoking and taking pills like a madman. So when I finally took my time, I was supposed to turn myself in. I turned myself in. I quit cold turkey. I was saying I'm not going to be sitting here taking. I know for a fact I'm not going to be sitting here taking pharmaceuticals in prison. I have a homeboy who came out of prison. Went to prison earlier from us, and did like 5 years and came out from the pharmaceuticals, and he was nutso. Like he came out and he was just nobody knew who he was. You know what I'm saying? So I knew for a fact I wasn't going to take pharmaceuticals in prison. That was a setup. So I quit cold turkey. And when I was in the county jail, I hadn't even got this job, just in there for about maybe 2 days. About the 3rd day, I had what I thought was an anxiety attack. And it was actually a seizure that landed me. They had to take me out of the jailhouse and took me to the hospital. And I was in there for 2 weeks. Like it was a week before I even knew where I was. I was shackled to a bed, half dead, watching Obama get inaugurated.
Wow. And so I just want to pause for a second, because you also demonstrated what can happen if you stop cold turkey.
Yeah.
Muscle tremors, muscle spasms, and life-threatening seizures.
Yeah, I almost died.
Life-threatening seizures is the main thing that can happen when you stop benzodiazepines cold turkey. So it's really, really important that be supervised by a healthcare professional who can help you wean down. So I just wanted to make that point. So go ahead.
So after that, in prison, Fortunately, I went to prison in my own city. I went to the camp called Dade CI, which is in the middle of Miami. Downstream from my peoples, we was getting weed inside of there all day long. I had as much weed as I wanted to smoke in the world inside prison. And so I didn't need any drugs. And I was actually not that bad in prison. I didn't even notice how much that affected my brain until I got out. When I got out and I couldn't smoke weed again because of probation.
How long was your probation?
4 years. And then it was like, mind you, I did end up smoking weed again on probation. I just, for the first part of it, I couldn't. And it just like let me realize, wait a minute here. I started smoking the spice stuff just to try and give me a little edge. And my sister.
And what's spice for our listeners who may not know?
That is that imitation cannabis. It's not real. It's a cannabis compound. They chemically created a cannabis, synthetic cannabis sprayed on some sort of
plant material.
Plant material, right. Anyhow, that was giving me a crutch. I seen it drive people nuts.
It can also kill you.
Yeah, it can also kill you. It was not good. I was still, my brain was still glitching from those benzos. I was still, probably also the trauma of going to prison and everything as well, but I was like, my brain was just shorting out. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't able to think straight and clearly. Like, I still have a small glitch from it, like literally. But what I did was, my sister was on Klonopin. I would take a piece of hers, and every like 4 nights or so, I would take a piece to help me sleep. When I ended up, about 4 years later, about 5 years after, I'm talking about maybe 3, 4, 5 years after, my brain is still not right. And I finally got into crafting cannabis, edibles and whatnot, crafting cannabis for medicine for people. And I went to decarboxylating extracts. And I one day tried a decarboxylated extract that I had made. And it took care of every issue that a benzodiazepine would have taken care of. Plus, one thing I noticed about the benzodiazepines, after I had been on it and know it now, I would know. And this is why I would only take a piece of it every 4 days. I would take it, and that time I take it, I would have a mini withdrawal. It'd be harder for me the next few days. And then it'd be like, I'd be okay for this day, and the next day, it'd be weird, and then I have to take it. It was just too much. The cannabis treated the condition, or treated whatever issues I had, the anxiety, the sleeping issues, everything. And then there's no adverse effects afterwards. And I would make myself these capsules, and I took them for medication. I also got into taking psilocybin mushrooms. I must mention that as well. Cannabis was there, and then psilocybin mushrooms is really what ended up treating everything to the point where I don't have to take anything else no more, unless I want to. I treat it periodically. Okay.
Well, to me, it sounds like cannabis helped you to wean off of benzos. That's what it sounds like.
Definitely.
And it's interesting because some of the molecules in cannabis do the same thing that benzodiazepines do. Benzodiazepines work by helping GABA, which stands for gamma butyric acid. It helps this neurotransmitter that helps us to be calm and sedate. Benzos help GABA bind to its receptors stronger and help you to feel more calm. Cannabis does the same thing via CBD, cannabidiol. We know that much, that CBD also helps GABA bind to its receptor. Not only that, our own endocannabinoid system, the major endocannabinoid, 2-AG, also helps GABA bind to its receptor. So we are already equipped when our GABA levels get low, and they do get low when you're faced with stress.
Right.
2-AG helps your GABA to bind to its receptor better. So we know that CBD does that too, and it may be other cannabinoids that do that same thing. It's just the CBD has been looked at a lot more than the other cannabinoids because they're monetizing it.
Right.
But it's kind of like vitamin D. It's like we got all this research on vitamin D, just because they decided to look at that. But there may be lots of other vitamins that do a whole lot of other stuff too. But it's like we're just focusing on vitamin D, like we're focusing on CBD. But in addition to 2-AG and our own endocannabinoid system and CBD, there's a flavonoid in cannabis called apigenin, and it actually stimulates the GABA receptor directly. It doesn't help GABA bind more quickly or strongly to the receptor. This flavonoid in cannabis and hemp actually stimulates our GABA receptors, calming us, sedating us, helping to decrease our anxiety, helping us to sleep. And I just find that amazing. And it's not, and apigenin is not only found in cannabis, it's found in lots of other botanicals like chamomile.
Right.
You know, I have one of my favorite teas at night when I can't sleep is chamomile lavender tea. And it turns out chamomile is very high in apigenin. And we know that, lavender linalool is very sedating and calming. The other foods like parsley, celery, spinach, our old friend oregano and basil, thyme, rosemary, artichokes, lemon balm, and for the drinkers out there, red wine and beer. Nice. All of these foods are high in apigenin, which stimulates our GABA receptors and help us to be calm and relaxed. So I strongly recommend everybody think about that, because we are about the plants and how it can help you be healthy. Other things that can help increase your endogenous GABA levels are vitamin B6 or B complex, magnesium. We know how depleted the soil is in magnesium. That might be part of the reason why everybody's so anxious. Mm-hmm. Magnesium helps to increase your GABA levels. Right. Melatonin, your gut microbiome. They've identified at least 3 species of bacteria that help you to increase your GABA levels. And finally, yoga and meditation help to increase your GABA levels, help you to be calm. So I found your story just very fascinating and instructive on this country's setting people up to fail with all these pharmaceuticals and drugs and drugging up our kids. And, it's a shame. And if we would just eat a whole foods, plant-based, rainbow-colored diet, we wouldn't have half of our issues.
That's what my mom treated me with growing up. My childhood Tourette's, I got diagnosed right off the rip, AD and ADHD, and I was I was the generation where started drugging kids. It was me. And they were to the point where they could afford it, and I was gonna get it. And she did not want it. And she literally just changed my diet and kept me, I was excelling in school and everything and doing just fine. Like I was fast tracked to be going to program schools, all type of foolishness. So and I wasn't taking no medication.
In wrapping this up, your mom's story also makes me remember that a lot of my patients who came from other cultures, other parts of the world, they didn't get sick until they came here and started eating the way that we eat. When they go back to the culture and the food and the diet that their ancestors was raised on, they're so much more healthier.
Right. She said that growing up, no one went to the doctor unless they were going to have a kid. That's pretty much all the doctor did, deliver kids. Every other reason was treat at home. And no one really got sick. So
thank you again, Oskii, for sharing your story.
Thank you, Doc.
It's amazing. You are amazing.
Thank you, Doc.
I'm so glad that the universe made sure that you got through that struggle so you can be with us here today to teach us how to be better.
Give thanks, Doc.
Thanks for listening. Please subscribe to this podcast. Also, look for us on YouTube and at plantsforlife.com.
Plants for Life. Plant-based lifestyles and ancient nutritional treatment strategies. Plants for Life.
The ideas presented in this podcast are meant for general informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. The Plants for Lyfe Podcast and Plants for Lyfe LLC and all affiliate subsidiaries disclaim any liability for any damages arising out of reliance on the information presented. Please consult licensed professionals for any medical, legal, or business advice.